compliance, the practice of obeying rules or requests made by people in authority.
This is the Pharmacy Compliance Guide with Jeff Hedges.
Welcome to the Pharmacy Compliance Guide. If you've gotten comfortable with HIPAA, look out. While there isn't a new federal requirement, there are some entities requesting new items that you may need to know about. Today's topic is offshore activities of our business associates. We will be discussing who's requesting this stuff, why they're requesting it, and what you can do to stay one step ahead. I'm Becky Templeton, Director of Business Development at R.J.Hedges and Associates, and I am so very glad to be joining you all for my very first podcast hosting appearance. Now, you may know him as the HIPPA guy, the Pharmacy Compliance Guide, or the man with a disaster recovery plan. To help work through today's questions, Jeff Hedges, owner of R.J.Hedges and Associates, is going to be joining us. Thank you so much, Jeff, for sharing your insights and opinions today. When I first read today's topic of offshore activities, I had visions of sitting beachside, sipping on a tropical drink, the little umbrella, my toes in the sand while working on my laptop. Sorry if you all are now daydreaming of vacation. Jeff, I'm sure we have several pharmacy owners that are listening that have received requests from either their PBMs or maybe possibly NCPDP asking about pharmacies to attest regarding offshore activities concerning HIPAA. Can you shed some light on what this actually means?
Well, in legal terms, it states, in accordance with the Federal Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, or HIPAA, Medicaid and Medicare regulations, and guidance from the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services, or CMS, we are required to attest annually whether our business associates are or are not using protected health information regarding our patients' offshore or overseas activities. Your business associates have an obligation to ensure their subcontractors and contractors who are using protected health information of our patients are disclosing the protected health information to the persons or entities located offshore. In layman's terms, you need to know how your business associates are using your PHI and if any of it is going overseas.
My business mantra has always been, do what you do best and contract the rest. Pharmacy owners are doing this all the time. You have to give great customer and patient care, and to do that, you need to utilize business associates to contract out some of the pharmacy's workloads, be it to other companies like billing, switches, tech, or customer support. What can pharmacy owners do now to prepare for these offshore activity requests?
To comply with these requests that are coming down from all the PBMs, each pharmacy must contact each business associate that is using your PHI, especially those using electronic PHI, and have them attest on an annual basis whether they're using your PHI by themselves or through contractors and subcontractors at an offshore location. As our wages here in the United States increase, you would be surprised how many companies, including software, customer service, call centers, billing companies, shoe companies, and the list goes on, are sending your patient's PHI overseas without your knowledge.
It's so crazy to think about the different items pharmacies have in place to help protect patient PHI. Everything from encrypted servers to locked cabinets, private consulting areas, workforce restrictions, even auditory deterrence. And now to find out that some of our business associates are sending our PHI overseas, it's really nerve-wracking. Jeff, can you share some of why the PBMs are also concerned about this practice?
Identity theft, pure and simple. Foreign nationals are not subject to our privacy laws. So if an offshore entity's employee steals one of your patient's PHI and uses their identity to set up any type of fake financial account, or even worse, take over your patient's bank accounts, there's nothing the FBI or law enforcement agencies can do about it. So you or your business associates are the only ones that are culpable at this point in time.
I bet if we could poll the audience right now, almost every hand would be up if we asked, are you surprised that this attestation is in place to prevent identity theft? An interesting fact that I'd like to share, according to a presentation by the FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigation, that's right, at the 2014 Healthcare Compliance Association Conference in Orlando, Florida, credit cards sell on the black market for just 50 cents, whereas a patient medical file is much, much more desirable to the tune of $200 if it's linked to a financial account. Jeff, can you share which countries are being contracted for these offshore services?
It's shocking, especially when you look at the countries that are working as subcontractors around the world. We all know about India, Indonesia, and the Philippines. But did you know Pakistan and Iran are also subcontractors? These two countries having your patient's PHI should make the hair on the back of your neck stand up. Would you trust them with your patient's PHI? Our government certainly doesn't trust them. This is why you need to know where your data is going.
You're right. We hear about these countries via the news media reporting some type of unscrupulous event or some type of civil unrest. It's very scary. Can you share some advice with our listeners on where they should start?
First, review your HIPAA business associates. There are some you are going to know that have no working relationships overseas, such as your assisted living facilities, patient safety organizations, and probably your PSAOs. But then you're going to have others you need to validate through an attestation letter. These companies will be billing companies, software companies, shoe companies, switches are the top four. And your reconciliation companies are probably going to fall into this group as well. This is also a good time to look at your PHI and all your business associates to make sure that all your files are up to date. All business associate agreements needed to be reissued after March 2013 and must have been updated and in place by September 2014. If you're missing any, simply reissue a new business associate agreement to the vendor. If the business associate issues their own BAA for you to sign, you must read it first. Do not sign it without reading it. Look for breach clauses, reporting clauses, waiver exclusions that are outside the context of the law. If you sign it and it does not comply with the law, you're stuck with it. The covered entity is solely responsible for issuing the business associate agreement. If you sign someone else's agreement, again, you're stuck with it. The business associate agreement is a contract between you and the vendor. Now that you have your list together, you send an attestation letter to each HIPAA business associate, requesting them to attest whether they do or do not use offshore employees, contractors, or subcontractors to perform activities such as receiving, processing, transferring, handling, storing, or accessing PHI at an offshore location. Develop a document similar to the one the PBMs are asking you to sign and ask the business associate to check a box with one of the two options and then send it back to you. Now you can truthfully answer the questions posed to you by the PBMs and NCPDP. File this attestation with your file copy of the business associate agreement. So when there is an audit, you have proof of the attestation. This will now become your annual requirement.
It sounds like now is a good time to do some housekeeping of all our business associate agreement files, including the agreements, PHI protocols, and correspondences. Jeff, we really haven't heard anyone else talk about this topic before. Why are you trying to bring this to everyone's attention?
Well, since I've joined NCPDP, I've been working on legislation and specifically on credentialing. And I want to make sure everyone knows and understands what the pharmacy needs to do now, rather when the PBMs come with their regulatory compliance demands down onto the pharmacy. This information has been out there, but not the knowledge of the enforcement. The attestations really isn't that hard. It's manageable. I think the business associates are going to object, but we are paying them. So they're going to have to get used to this attestations, just like we've had over the last several years. Overall, as we are moving forward with electronic PHI and information transcending throughout the world, we have to know about our data. We have to be aware where our data is going. We simply can't sit wherever we are in the United States and assume it's going to our vendor and we can trust our vendor to handle our PHI. They get our PHI and it's out on the internet and they can transmit it to anywhere in the world in a nanosecond. So we are responsible for our own data and responsible for the vendors we choose. We have to ask them. We have to get an attestation and we have to be able to make sure that we can show to the PBMs that our data is secured. We also have to be able to show our patients that their PHI is secure. The last thing we want to do is have our own patients' data breached and not be able to tell them how it happened. It's our responsibility. It's our patients. It's our friends. So we take this seriously, not because it's a PBM requirement, not because it's a HIPAA requirement. It could also be your information. So look at it from that point of view. So in all, let's get ahead of the game. Let's do our due diligence. And it's a lot easier to start this up as a requirement this year for an attestation, and this will become an annual requirement. And when the PBMs start coming in, and we all know CVS Caremark comes in, Optum comes in, and now Humana's starting on-site verifications and credentialing verifications, we know they're going to ask for it. So now you're going to have the documentation readily available. These audits and credentialing visits go a lot easier. If you don't, it's a painful day.
I think a great way to recap our conversation: be aware, be proactive, be responsible for knowing that extra step of where your business associates are sending your patient's PHI. Jeff, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and offering your suggestions. And for all you listeners out there, thanks for tuning in. And if you'd like to know what we'll be discussing next, I do believe the topic of employee terminations is going to be discussed by the one and only Jeff Hedges as it pertains to all things compliance here on the Pharmacy Compliance Guide.